Oh, the water.
We are talking Dwellers. Now this one is directed, stars and written by Drew Fortier and actually is produced by David Ellefson, he of Megadeth fame, who actually does have a small role within the movie. And this is a mostly found footage film about three documentary filmmakers who decide that they are going to investigate the disappearances of homeless people in these kind of like these sewer systems, and they find out that there may be something other than human in there. What will happen? You have to watch the movie to find out. So let's discuss Dwellers. Low budget found footage movie. What works? I think the thing for me is that I would say is the best thing about this movie is the great locations that they have found to shoot this in. It will kind of remind you of that movie As Above, So Below, where it's kind of all subterranean. The majority of the movie is subterranean, and they've got these kind of like, you know, huge kind of dark tunnels which do seem very, very oppressive and a great location for a kind of a horror movie. And one of the things I enjoyed here was when they run out of light, it's pitch black, and a lot of the time you'll see kind of like, you know, some type of light that is there just so we can kind of see what's going on, but narratively it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And it's a small thing, but I actually quite like the fact that when we do have no light, it is pitch black. I actually kind of quite enjoyed some of our kind of characters. Less so the kind of the main guy, who I have to say was probably out of the three of them had the least amount of a real character. But we have this kind of like, this big guy, although I'm not really sure what they were doing there, to be honest with you. I mean, there's a three-man crew, although it's not really explained what the actual jobs are, to be honest with you. But we have this kind of big guy there, and he's like a little bit easy led, and I kind of, you know, you got the idea that that was the sense with him. He just wants to kind of be part of the conversation and kind of go along with things, and is very agreeable, but ultimately quite easily manipulated. And then this other guy who is a little bit kind of like somewhat camp, but sarcastic and quite funny, and has a little bit kind of smarter maybe than even probably the smartest guy in the room out of the three of these. And I quite enjoyed his kind of character as well. That was quite fun. What we do see in regards to effects is brief, and obviously I would assume it's because it's really obviously a low budget. But I do say there was a couple of okay prosthetics on display here, which I thought was okay. Okay, let's talk about what doesn't work in this movie. So the first half an hour of this movie is our trio essentially interviewing homeless people. And yeah, it's, you know, it's going down the Blair Witch kind of route ultimately of how to do a found footage movie. It's something we've seen many times before. It doesn't really try and stray too far out of the tried and tested formula, and ultimately becomes somewhat unoriginal because of this. It's the same thing. It's, you know, it's kind of a bunch of interviews at the beginning. Don't go in the tunnels. There's something spooky down there. All these stories, etc. Yada yada yada. Inevitably they do. They find something. It's the same plot ultimately. So that was a little. There needed to be a little bit cleverer with the script ultimately. And instead of just making a carbon copy of the Blair Witch, it needed to have a little bit more to it. There's a subplot here about a cover-up where we think the authorities may know that there's something going on. Poorly handled. We're meant to believe that just random police officers know that there's some type of creatures in the sewers, but they're not doing anything about it. It just seemed very, very silly. And it gets to the peak of silliness at the end. The last scenes in the film where we have one of the agents from The Matrix turn up. Yeah, I'm not shitting you. I mean, not literally, but it may as well be, but it's ridiculously silly. And then we have sequences that are kind of not found footage, and they're meant to be like these police doing interviews with one of the survivors and stuff, and it's like they're quite poorly acted, those sequences. And then it ends up like the mega cheese. In regards to the effects, just kind of going back to that, what we see on screen, I think is okay, but it's clearly they can only afford to have a small portion of what is meant to be down there on screen, and as such, we only ever really see this thing's hands. There's one brief shot where we see like a face, but ultimately it's just kind of like you've got like one prop out of you, like one like pair of rubber, you know, monster hands or something. So it comes a little bit silly, and then there's just logic issues in this film. We have these three characters who seem to have one camera, but we get separated in the movie. Some of the characters get separated, and the people that have the camera, you know, there's the guy who doesn't have the camera. He says, "Oh, look at the footage." And we're like, "Well, you didn't have the camera, so how are they looking at the footage?" Then there's a scene where they literally say we've run out of space on the SD card, but they're still filming, and this is the found footage, so we're meant to believe this is obviously footage that was recorded. You've just said you've run out of space. So there's some kind of logistical issues in regards to kind of like things like how the plot would have kind of broken down on a technical level, but even things like one of the kind of the plot points here is these creatures are afraid of light. So think of them a little bit like the creatures from The Descent, and yet they have one camera which seems to have a light on it, but no one's like trying their mobile phones. I mean, okay, you might not be able to get a signal down there, that's fine, but it can still produce light. And then we have characters where they're smoking. I think so. They've definitely got either a lighter or matches. Why aren't they kind of making, you know, a torch, like a flaming kind of like, we see they find like a baseball bat. I'm sure there's other things that burn down there. No one thinks to kind of like light a fire to make other kind of the sources and light. So, to me, this is just like, the writer here, who is also the director and star, just hasn't thought about things logically. And it's just kind of like, yeah, whatever, just kind of like, meh. And it makes it so, with a found footage movie, you can kind of, the upside of making a found footage film is that you can kind of get away with making it quite cheap and having kind of like, maybe not as good actors looking at the camera and stuff, because it's part of the film. But you've got to make it immersive. You have to believe that these things that you're watching are, you know, are meant to be, we're meant to suspend our disbelief and believe that we're watching, you know, kind of a realistic idea about what would happen in this situation. And when you get a found footage movie that kind of just ignores some kind of like, which I think you can sometimes do in more traditionally filmed movies, you know, some lapses in logic, yeah, you can kind of whatever happens. But with found footage, the conceit here is you can make it on the cheap, but you've got to kind of like be able to kind of suspend your disbelief and believe what it is you're seeing. And there's just this movie has scene after scene where it doesn't do that. We never really get a good look at our creatures, and then we have a scene where our main character is like, oh, we're gonna be, you know, we're gonna capture these kind of things on screen, you know, on video, and it's gonna make us famous. And then there's one sequence where he's kind of looking through a hole in the wall, and this guy's watching them, but he never says, get your camera in there, let's have a look, obviously because they can't afford to show creatures, but in the narrative flow of the story, it doesn't make sense. And also that room looks like it's lit when we've just been told that these things don't like light. So there's all sorts of kind of logical problems here that just kind of like a blah, you know, don't worry about it. And if you want to have a drinking game in this movie, have a drink every time they say the word Ellefson, as in David Ellefson, as in the bassist of Megadeth, because they throw his name around like you're meant to remember it. And it becomes a little bit unnatural. Ellefson. You'll be pissed, let me tell you. This film was had a good idea, I think, and the location was good, but squandered over some really poor script writing here and directorial decisions. It's a 3 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.